Welcome, friends. Today I'd like to talk to you about fasting. And we're going to cover all the dimensions of fasting and how important it is. You know, on this channel and several others, we deal with spiritual issues. We talk and discuss and share insights and reflections and revelations and realizations of all kinds that are spiritual. And that is never to insinuate to neglect the physical. You know, we are holistic beings. You know, you have a body and you're in it. Or it's in you, depending on the belief system, or maybe both. But, you know, holistic is important. Spirit, the soul, but also the mind, the body, the emotions, all of this. And everything affects everything. That's important to remember. Everything affects everything. If one aspect of your being is out of alignment or an imbalance or is full of toxicity, it's going to affect everything, because that's a part of the whole, the holistic you. So just as we've talked in so many different ways about releasing things spiritually, mentally, we also need to release things physically. And that's why, although the main theme of this discussion is fasting, I'm going to preface that with a prelude of detox. I highly recommend, for the sake of your total physical and holistic detoxification, cleansing, and purification, that you do a detox. Choose the one that works best for you or that you're most able to do, whatever. There are many. One that I can suggest is what's called the lemon pyramid. And there's a whole lot of lemons involved here, but it's all natural. What you do is, it's a lemon pyramid, meaning that from day 1 you start with 1 lemon. Day 2 you start with 2 lemons. Day 3 you start with 3 lemons. And so on and so on and so on, all the way up to 10 lemons, which is day 10. And then you reverse it 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so that the progression up is one side of the pyramid, and then the progression down is the other side of the pyramid. And that's why it's called the lemon pyramid. Now what you do is, day 1, you start with all of the juice from 1 lemon. Get a lemon squeezer, a fresh lemon, cut it in half, get all the juice out of it, and drink it down. Now let me give you a tip. Keep it off of your teeth. Keep lemon juice and vinegar and anything that's very highly acidic, keep it off your teeth, because as good as it is for your body to drink lemon juice and vinegar, it is terrible for your teeth. And that is often neglected to be advised. So what I suggest is, the word is quaff. Take it down, right? You know? So you drink the undiluted juice of 1 lemon. Boom! Take it down, but try to keep it off your teeth. Try to just get it, you know, quaff it down. And then you wait 30 minutes. And then do whatever it is you do all day. Have your coffee, have your breakfast, whatever you do. But give yourself, first thing in the morning when you wake up, 1 lemon. That's day 1. Now day 2, do the same thing, but use 2 lemons. Day 3, do the same thing, but use 3 lemons. You see? So you don't want to buy all of your lemons at once, because they're probably going to not be fresh by the time you get to them at the end. So just buy like 2 or 3 days ahead of what you need. And remember that it's starting off low, and then you're going to need a whole lot when you get up to 10. And then you're going to keep needing a whole lot until you wean off to the end. Let me tell you, I have done this detox. You are going to lose weight. You are going to visibly see toxic things come out of you. You will see it because, let's just say, things get very dark. And you are going to feel a lot better. Now, if you find that going all the way up to 10 lemons is too much for you, then, maybe go up to 7 or 8, whatever is, because it is very acidic, and for some people maybe it'll give you heartburn or something like that. Your body will tell you what it can take, but if you can take it to the peak of 10, then do that. If you are very impatient and like to take shortcuts, which I have done with this a couple times, and you know you can handle it, start with 3, go to 5, go to 7, go to 12. You know what I mean? But basically, if this is the first time you've ever done it, I highly recommend that you do it by protocol, according to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up to 10 and 9 and 8 and down. So you're looking at a 20-day purge, a 20-day detox. No chemicals, no... It's really actually easy. Just do it first thing in the morning and then let it work its way through you for 30 minutes. That is the lemon detox. Are there others? Of course there are. Choose the one that works for you. I've offered you that one. I would suggest that you do a detox as a preliminary step before you begin fasting. Now let's move to fasting itself. What are we talking about fasting? Abstinence. Doing without something. Normally we're talking about food. It could be other things, but let's keep it for food just for now. Fasting from a spiritual angle, not from a weight loss or a physical health aspect are we talking about. However, you can't help but also benefit physically in the body and holistically from fasting. But what I'm saying is that's not our motive. That's not our drive, our inspiration to do it. Our inspiration is spiritual. We are talking about fasting for the sake of our spirituality. What happens when we fast? The lower cravings and drives and base urges of the body that we have maybe grown very used to, and maybe, honestly, we have grown to really like, craving sugar, craving carbs, craving lots of meat, heavy foods, fried foods, the Elvis diet. Sure tastes great, but the moment it passes your throat, it's not any good for you at all. So all those cravings and base desires where the result is that you're kind of being controlled by your body. Your body is calling all the shots. And that is contrary to the true hierarchy of your being, which is King Soul on the throne, and mind and body as servants of the soul, under the control or under the command of the soul. Certainly not your intellect belongs on that throne. Remember that. We've talked about that a few times. If you're living up here, nope. You got to be living from here. King Soul, Queen Soul. Okay, that is the correct hierarchy of your being. Now, fasting reduces, dissipates, lowers those carnal, lower base drives that might be yanking you around. Gee, I'd love to do this certain spiritual practice for a week or two that would be very good for me, but man, I gotta have a few beers. I gotta have that steak. And I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying don't eat meat and never have I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it helps get things under control, just naturally by pulling the plug on them, okay? So that's what fasting does, and by pulling the plug on those base, denser, cruder, lower drives, cravings, and desires that might be yanking you around and kind of ruling you, what that does is when that's cleared, soul will rise up in your being and take its appropriate, proper, and intended place on the throne of the hierarchy of your being, where it belongs. That's where you should be living from. That's where your decisions and discernments and all that are, that's where the shots are called, okay? So that's one of the reasons why we fast. The other reason why we fast is for a very specific petition, a very specific request or spiritual goal. Maybe you're tired of being a slave to alcohol. Maybe you're tired of being a slave to internet. Maybe you're tired of binging on junk food as a response to feeling restless and stressed out, and all you name it. Whatever is your spiritual request that you ask of God, of Source, of Supreme Divinity. What is it you would like to be given the graces to achieve? What outcome do you aspire to by means of this fasting? There should be a specific reason. I don't want to say make a wish, but it's like, do it for a reason. Do it for a spiritual goal. Not just to abstain, from things. And the next thing I want to tell you is that it's very important when you fast. First of all, you shouldn't overdo it. Start where you are. If that means skipping one meal, then that's where you start. If you've got a little more practice and you can handle more, maybe you can do a full day. Maybe you can do 2 days. Maybe you can do 3. It's not about, look at me, I can't wait to tell everybody how many days I didn't eat. It's absolutely the opposite of that. Your fasting needs to be between you and God, or however you want to define that, between you and Source. It is not good. It is contrary to the purpose of fasting to let others know about it. It's something, if you want to keep it as a little secret for fun, okay, but it's between you and the divine. It's not meant for anyone else to know. And therefore, you don't tell anybody you're doing it. You don't tell anybody you're going to do it. And you don't tell anybody you did it. It's best this way. It is most authentic, innocent, and pure, and effective when it's just between you and God. Okay? So, to review, it's to dissipate those carnal base urges, allow the soul, the spirit, to rise up and take its proper place in the hierarchy of your being. There is a specific petition in mind, which is the reason why you're fasting, for the sake of that petition. And it is private, it is personal and intimate between you and Divine Source, God. Now, the other thing is that sometimes you will choose of your own free will to fast for the sake of spiritual discipline and part of your spiritual practice, and that's all good. It's wonderful. You might do it regularly. You might do it occasionally when you feel you need it, and you might also say, gee, I think this might become a 1 day a week thing or a 3 day a month thing for me, whatever. That's great. But also, be aware and be open to the occasions in which Spirit will nudge you and let you know that it is good for you to fast now. Even if you don't know why. You don't need to know why. You just need to trust and flow and do it. Respond affirmatively with yes, and do it. And sometimes it isn't long at all before you come out the other side of it knowing why you were led to do it. So sometimes you may just choose to do it, and that's great. But sometimes you will feel called to do it. You will feel the unction, as they say. Definitely respond and follow through with it when you feel that. The next point I'll make is pray for help. Ask for help. I'll tell you why. If you do a 3-day fast, the first day you're going to feel some sense of accomplishment and a little bit of weakness, a little bit of, I can feel that I've not eaten today. I can get through. A little bit tough going to bed without eating anything yet, but if I just keep with the fast and fall asleep, I'm fine. Wait till you get to the second day. Second day is hardest. Pray for help. Ask for graces, especially if you feel that Spirit has led you to fast. You will receive help. I vow this to you. And when day 3 comes, you will feel different. You will feel lighter and cleaner and purer and more connected, and almost some kind of ethereal essence to your awareness. Not that you have to do 3 days, but that's an example, okay? Ask for help, which leads us to our next point. While you are fasting, pray. Go about your business and do your day normally, and don't tell people you're doing it, and don't make it obvious by looking like you're, oh, I'm fainting, and I can't get through the day because I'm fasting. You just keep that in your pocket. That's just between you and divinity, okay? Don't change what you would normally be doing. Go do your normal day. But ask for help and pray for help, and I promise you, you will receive it, because this is a noble endeavor. Don't take any pride in doing it, but you will receive help, because it is right and good. You will be upheld. I value this, okay? I vow this to you. And if you're starting a fast and you really don't know how long you can do it, maybe I can manage a half a day. I don't know. I think maybe I could do 2 days. Pray for discernment. How long is right for me this fast? It might be a meal. It might be 3 days. It might be fasting from the internet for 2 days. Whatever it is, ask for guidance and discernment. Just ask. You will be helped. You are loved. You are cared for. You are sustained and upheld. You will be helped. Okay? So, I don't think I'm leaving anything out there. But while you are fasting, remember to pray often. If you can, constantly. Quietly to yourself in your own mind. And however else you want to pray. Be in a state of suspended prayer. Let your life be a living prayer during the times you are fasting. I should say especially during the times you are fasting, because ideally, shouldn't we hope to make our entire lives a living prayer? But especially while you are fasting, make your day a living prayer. Be in a state of constant communion with Source, God, divinity. And that's what fasting is about. And remember that it doesn't have to be about food. It can be from some addiction you have, or some indulgent pleasure that you would like to make an offering of austerity and abstinence for the sake of some petition, prayer. Whatever feels like it's appropriate for you where you are, according to your heart. And I definitely recommend that you include or prelude your fast with a detox. Or if not, maybe after. But I would suggest before you start to do the detox. And hey, maybe this is something, as I mentioned before, that could become a regular part of your sadhana, your daily spiritual practice. Because physical absolutely matters. Every aspect of your holistic being matters. So that's my offering on fasting. And now I'm going to welcome a very dear friend of mine who I've known for several years. Somebody who I'm very lucky to be able to host and introduce to you today, because I wasn't sure if this was going to happen or not. You'll understand why in a moment, and here we go. Welcome to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm so happy to see you here today, because I'm introducing to you for the very first time a truly, truly beloved and dear brother, a great friend of mine, coming to us from St. Joseph's Abbey, all the way out in Spencer, Massachusetts. I'm very happy and honored to introduce to our viewers my great friend, Father Emmanuel Morinelli. There he is. Father Emmanuel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was not necessarily the easiest thing to get you to come on, but I appreciate very much that you have. I mean, we had to jump through all kinds of hoops, the
Yeah.
magisterium, the bishop, the pope, the Vatican, the whole thing. So, but Father Emmanuel, thank you so much. I'm
You're
very
welcome.
honored and I appreciate that you've come here today. We're talking
Sure.
today about fasting. And I would like to have you share your wisdom and experience with fasting, and maybe you can sprinkle a little bit of a Catholic perspective on there for us, and everyone will take from our guests what works for them and what makes sense for them, and engage it in their own lives. So, first of all, what is fasting? Exactly, what is it?
Okay. Fasting is usually considered a complete abstinence from food and drink, though there are such things as partial fasting, where you may fast for a certain time of day, or particular kinds of food or drink. And it all basically is scriptural based. That's the most important thing. It really, for us as Catholic Christians, we look to the scriptures for inspiration for fasting, and especially to the Hebrew Bible, where the early Christians, received the tradition. And it's very prevalent in the Old Testament, not only with individuals, but also with whole groups of people. So we, take, for example, Moses and Elijah, they prepared themselves to meet God. And then you had groups or whole peoples that were fasting. For example, when the prophet Jonah visits Nineveh to tell them that God is unhappy and was going to destroy their nation, the king proclaims a fast for everybody, tells them to put on sackcloth, to mourn. Even the animals were asked to fast and call out to God, that God would relent, and change his mind, basically. So that's pretty common, I'd say, in the Old Testament. And then in the Jewish tradition, there's a yearly service called the Day of Atonement, which you might call a yearly penitential day, where people express their sorrow for sins, and help and ask God's mercy, so that they can live a better life. And it also includes fasting, that's for sure. And there's also in the New Testament, the prime example, of course, is Jesus himself, who goes to the desert for 40 days to fast before his public ministry. And so for us, that's kind of the place that we go to find inspiration for the whole practice of fasting. And the early Christians basically followed that. They took this as their example, and the church, it developed, in many different ways, but most especially it was seen as a way of expressing penitence, sorrow for sins, and also the desire for conversion, to change one's life. And interesting thing is that fasting for fasting's sake has never been part of the church's tradition. In other words, we just don't fast because it's a requirement. Fasting has always been coupled with almsgiving and the poor. So which is wonderful, because it's not just a penitential practice. It's also a way that you can take what you're fasting from to give to the poor. So in ancient times, the money was saved from the food that they wouldn't eat, and that money will be given to the poor, and for them to eat. So it had a real important place, within the church's tradition. I think the thing that's most prevalent, or known to people around the world, is Lent, the season of Lent, which is the 40 days before Easter, preparation for Easter, which has always been a penitential season, which included fasting. Over the centuries, that fasting has kind of become less and less, and not what it used to be, many centuries ago. Um, but it still is a time of penitence. And every Catholic is required to fast on the Fridays of Lent, which basically means abstinence from meat, or smaller meals. So, in other words, instead of taking 3 full meals, we're asked to take 1 full meal, and the others are smaller. And in recent times, during Lent, Catholic families are asked to keep a little fund of money that they would normally spend on food or something similar, to give to the poor, so that at the end of Lent, they would be able to donate this money to the church for a specific purpose. Most especially people who can't eat, people who have very little food, can't buy food. So that's always been part of the tradition, in fasting, at least in the Catholic Church. It most especially it's for spiritual insight. It's not just uh, fasting to say, that I gave up 3 meals today, or I didn't eat for 5 days. That's never been part of it. It's always has a spiritual connection. So, in other words, why do we fast? Mainly because of the need for conversion. That's what we're really looking for. We want to have some kind of conversion, a different relationship with God, also to turn our attention from ourselves outward, outward. Because when you fast, I think you became more aware of people who have less than you do. And it's a way, I think, an expression of solidarity with the poor, because you begin to realize there are a lot of people on the planet that don't have much to eat or very little to eat, don't have clean water, just don't have the opportunities that we have, in wealthier nations. And for us, especially, I think it's a really positive opportunity to open ourselves outward, to look at the world, and to see people who have so much less. We live in a society that has everything, at least in the first world, as we call it. We have so many advantages, economically, and we lose track of all the people in the world, many more than us, that have so less. And so fasting is a real opportunity to broaden our vision, to see what's really out there in the world, because the society that we live in is a very self-centered kind of society, where we're constantly looking for our own benefit, our own satisfaction, and it keeps us closed in. And so fasting, at least for me, has always been a sense that it's to open. It's also penitential, in the sense that it expresses my sorrow, for sin. But it also, I think, keeps us detached from all the things that kind of hold us down or take our attention, especially our sins. That's the most important part. We fast because we're aware of our failures, and we want to change that. We want to make that right. We want to be right with God, but also right with other people. That's the most important thing too. So we're not just fasting for ourselves, we're fasting for the way that we misuse things, the way we mistreat people. It's an important part of this conversion of life. The interesting thing is that in the early church, penance was public. So if somebody did something particularly, wrong or sinful, they had to acknowledge that publicly, and it was usually done with some kind of penance. But of course, in recent years, that became, more private. We had the practice of confession, confessing your sins to a priest, to receive absolution, to receive, forgiveness, so that you could be right with God again. And so that's always been part of this Catholic tradition, and fasting has always been kind of essential to this practice, not just for the sake of physical benefits, but, for the sake of this interior cleansing, this interior benefit, making ourselves right with God. It's actually being suggested in recent years that people fast from the internet, that they fast from texting, that they fast from entertainment, they fast from things, that take their attention away from the reality of life, and especially how other people live. I think for the future, that's probably going to be a new route for us, because fasting from food isn't as difficult as we may say it is, but fasting from the things that we like or prefer, or the things that make us, comfortable, or something new. And so that's perhaps a new way of fasting for the future. I'm certainly looking in that direction for myself, because I feel at times overwhelmed by things that are, beyond me, and that I can't keep up with. Especially as a monk, of course, we try to be somewhat separated from the world. That's important for us. In a sense, that's a kind of fasting as well. To not get so involved that our attention is taken away from God and our life of contemplation and prayer. So that's important for us. So that's kind of where fasting is right now in the Catholic tradition. So, Brian, I would ask, do you fast? Have you ever practiced fasting?
Me, I fast between meals.
Between meals?
uh, yes, I have,
Yeah.
and I have actually felt a great urge to produce and share this particular topic, somewhat in a means of projection, because I have felt personally very much lately called to do it again. And I thought, yeah, I hear you. I know. But I also want to use the opportunity of, the little nudges, increasingly bigger nudges that I'm getting to start doing this as a regular, much more regular routine thing. To share the awareness of it and the understanding and background of it with everybody who would partake of it. And
Right.
we started off with what is fasting, and you led right into the next question, which I was going to ask, which is why fast, but you've already covered a lot of that. And I think that a lot of what you offered from the Catholic perspective is some of it I didn't personally know, and I'm glad to know that. And I like the way you framed it and contextualized it within the context of selfless charity.
Right.
It's not
Right.
just, hey, I'm going to go without for the day or whatever number of days, or I'm going to skip this or do it. There's a whole deeper foundation and context to the fasting itself. This might be a little too specific, but you are a monk in the Cistercian or Trappist tradition. Is there anything, for example, would you say that your austerities with fasting, et cetera, might be stricter than some other orders, or is it more or less generally about the same?
Well, we have our own tradition, within the Trappist order, that we abstain from meat at all times.
Okay.
That's always been part of our tradition for the last 900 years.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of it. Plus, we are encouraged to fast at certain times during the week, at least once or twice. That's always been important. And it comes from the rules of Saint Benedict, of course.
Okay.
Who his rule for monks, and it's certainly encouraged during Lent. The fascinating thing is that Saint Benedict says that if you're going to do something more than normal, you have to get the permission of your spiritual father. You have to ask the abbot, because otherwise it's presumption. It's pride. It's basically pride. And so the sin of pride kind of eliminates the whole purpose of fasting. If it's just to say, look at me,
Right.
I haven't eaten in 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah.
But that isn't it, so it has to be done for the right reasons.
Mhm.
That's important, I think.
Mm.
The other thing I was thinking of is that, in at least in today's culture, um, fasting is usually connected to weight loss. It's an interest more in in health and beauty. That overeating is a problem, and especially in this country, in the United States, obesity is way out of control, way out of control. And people don't have the ability, or basically the physical discipline, to eat normally, to eat regularly, and overeating, and obesity have become a real problem. And it says to me that there are other real problems underneath that nobody wants to address, or they're afraid to address. And it usually it has to do with unhappiness. They're unhappy with themselves, they're unhappy with their life, and overeating is a way of basically curing that in one sense, or making you feel better. And so it's sad in one sense that that's that part of our culture at the moment. And fasting is one way for people to stop, and to gain some kind of control or self-discipline, which in itself isn't bad. We all need some kind of self-discipline in our life. But the other problem, the other extreme, you might say, are people who they just ruin their health, because they just can't stop, and so they become anorexic, and that and that's another problem that's kind of it's all connected, of course, to the sense of beauty. Everybody wants to look fit and beautiful and handsome, uh, and so you have to watch what you eat. You have to change
Yeah.
what you eat.
Yeah.
Diets have always been a big thing, in at least in this country. But so fasting, for that reason, really isn't the same, as
Yeah. I mean,
for
fasting is
spiritual.
not dieting. Fasting is not
No,
dieting. I mean, that's the point we're
no,
trying to make here, is that don't conflate the two.
right,
It's
right.
one thing to try and I don't want to say subdue, but to try and get ahead of being controlled by your bodily desires and cravings and all that, thrown around, whipped around like a slave by those things.
Mm,
Fasting is definitely effective for helping at that. But as you
right.
mentioned, with you know overeating and starving yourself, whatever labels and degrees of that someone is experiencing, though those are both imbalances, just two ends of the same spectrum. And
Mhm.
but what caught my interest before is that you mentioned that fasting need not only be about fasting from food, but from I've got a scary idea here. How about your smartphone? Can you do it
Oh,
for a day?
ah, ah, ah.
So
Well,
actually let me answer your question to me. Do I fast? I've been fasting from owning an automobile and owning a smartphone and a
uh,
microwave and all those other things I got rid of for 11 years.
mm,
So that
mhm.
counts for something.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's part of personal discipline, learning personal discipline for other, for more important reasons. And I think today it's becoming more and more problematic, uh, that people are addicted to all of these things, that take their life away, take their
Absolutely.
personality away.
Take their life
Um,
force away.
exactly, and keep them from relating to other people, you know, for real, and not just, on the phone or FaceTime or,
Yeah,
it's just
I think worse than that is the coming incalculable tsunami of the impact that AI is going to have on humanity as a collective and the human soul specifically. But
right.
that is a huge topic for another episode.
Well,
We'll just
it
touch and
is.
drop that. But
True,
do you
true.
have any additional tips, or if somebody says, okay, I want to do this fasting thing, maybe a lot of people watching are very experienced already. I like very much, by the way, how you added the caveat of spiritual vanity. Be careful that if you are endeavoring to fast, the ego just can creep in there and say, you're
Right.
doing a great job. You're really, really good at this. You are really accomplished. Good for you. You're much better than those people over there. They probably couldn't do what you're doing. That's the ego chatter. So I
Right,
very
right.
much like that you threw that in. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of people, they don't want to hear it. And it's exactly what we need to hear.
No, no. In
Don't
fact,
step on that spiritual
no,
landmine. Yeah.
Jesus himself in the Gospels ridicules people who fast just for show. He'll say, look at those people on the sidewalk. They're fasting. They don't, wash their face. They don't comb their hair. They look disheveled because they want everybody to know I'm
Yeah.
fasting,
Yeah.
and that's pride. And he says, when you fast, wash your face. Wear clean clothes. So that people don't know that you're fasting. Only your
Exactly.
Father in heaven knows. And that's
Exactly.
what counts.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips for somebody that's looking to fast, possibly for the first time or beyond?
Start small. Start small.
Right.
Skip a meal. Give up things that you like to eat, for a period of time. Start with something small, and then you can work larger. But also, it's a way of testing yourself, to see, how much can I really endure? How much can I deal with? I don't want to fast that it makes me sick. That's wrong. But I think in the beginning you have to see what you're capable of doing. Because everybody is different. Some people can go for long periods of time, they're fine. Some people can go for a short period of time. For some people, fasting, as you said, is not eating between meals. That can be difficult for many people. Especially for a lot of people who like to snack
Yeah.
all the time. Can I give that up for a little while? What is it like to fast for a day? What is it like to fast for a meal? And experience that, and kind of try to integrate that into your life and find out, does it have any spiritual benefit for me, any spiritual value? I would hope that the main thing is that it opens you, to a wider world, and to other people, who really suffer, and fast, because not because of them, what they, desire, but because of, their situation in life.
Yeah.
So that's important. I say one final thing that, Jesus also uh, ties together with fasting and almsgiving is prayer. So it's like a threefold practice. You know, we fast, and we give to the poor as much as possible. it opens us to, recognize the poor around us, and there's all kinds of poor, not just, monetary. There's, poverty of all kinds today. And also prayer. So, we pray for those people as well as trying to help them as much or as little as possible for us. So it's a threefold practice, and not just a particular kind of observance that we do to feel good about ourselves, but it's important. So I think that's always been part of the Catholic Christian tradition, um, that it's not about me, you know it's about the world that I live in, and it's about my own spiritual life, and how good is that? Am I satisfied with that? Do I want a better relationship with God? That's basically where all of this practice, comes to life. At least for me, anyway, as an individual.
Do you think, or is it taught that before Jesus began his personal ministry, the 40 days in the desert, and I presume that Lent is deliberately mirrored off of that. The
Absolutely.
40 days.
Absolutely.
Is it believed and taught that he literally did not consume any food whatsoever? And I mean, he had to drink water, I guess.
Right, right.
Is it known exactly how he fasted? I've always been curious about that.
That I've never known,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's even, if anybody knows the answer to that
Right,
question,
right. Well, I threw you the
but
curveball because I've always wondered it, and I personally have never found any description, you know, when the intellect kicks in. And so exactly how did he, I didn't
yeah,
get
the,
any specific details about it. So
no, the ending though is, the ending of that gospel is very important, of the fasting of the desert, because the Satan appears, the devil appears and tempts Jesus, and says, you haven't eaten for 40 days, you're God. See these stones, turn them into bread, you'll satisfy your hunger. And Jesus refuses, and says, not on bread alone does man live. So, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So that's an important lesson for us, And then he tempts his pride, see all these beautiful cities, all these kingdoms, they can all be yours. And, and Jesus again rejects and says, that's not why I'm here. That's not what this is about, and that's not what we're about, as human beings. So he basically tests his pride to see, and then of course Jesus, did not fall prey into these suggestions by the devil, and the devil disappears. Satan disappears because he knows that he can't tempt Jesus.
yeah,
So it's an interesting connection between this time of fasting. The 40 in the Bible is an important number, because the Jews spent 40 years wandering in the desert,
yeah,
after they left Egypt, and that was kind of a penance, you might say, for them. They could have gotten there to the Holy Land a lot quicker, but they wandered because they weren't following what the Lord was asking them to do,
right.
and so it took them much longer. That in itself is a kind of a allegory, I think,
Hmm.
for us.
Hmm.
That we wander. We have a tendency to wander, and instead of going forward, and we're wandering because we're looking in all these different directions instead of straight ahead, and trying to listen to what God is speaking to us in our heart.
Well, you made me think also of a line that I read while I was there with you at the Abbey on retreat years ago, the Hermitage Within.
Right.
There's a line in there that says the desert is the inverse negative of Eden. I've never forgotten it when I read that. And I know that since we both dabble in photography,
Right.
you can think of the desert as the negative in the old days of film, whereas
Right.
the glorious color image would be Eden, life
Right.
exploding everywhere. And the desert is the flip side negative of that. And that's why St. Anthony the Great and so many mystics and seekers from all traditions have
Right.
gone to either the desert or way up into the mountains, which is also desert-like,
Right.
to get away
Right.
from it all, to
Exactly.
reduce
Exactly.
the distractions and things that they would inject themselves into and get entangled in the world, to remove all of that so that there you are left to
Mhm.
face you.
That's right.
And so
That's
the
right.
desert is a great place for that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting. All monastic life began in the desert. It didn't begin in cities. It began
right.
in desert because they knew they had this intuition that they had to remove themselves. They had to get away. That solitude was an important part of the spiritual experience, and also the most difficult, because the hermit, as you said, is suddenly confronted with himself or herself. You know, it's now me with me, and all kinds of things that in another context are perhaps, covered over or distracted, suddenly become real, and loom before us. And so how are we going to learn to live with this? What's the lesson for us? How do we grow in our spiritual life? And so that's always been a kind of a perennial theme, through all of history, and I think through all religions, that this encounter with God. St. Augustine says, you cannot know God if you don't know yourself. So self knowledge is the core. It's key to any kind of development in the spiritual life, any seeking of God.
I think one mirrors the other, but I
Absolutely.
also think I love what the Sufi tradition offers to that, which is that you can't even see or know yourself through your own eyes in the first place. You can only
Right.
come to see and understand and know yourself through God's eyes. And I think
Right.
that in some way that our human brains and intellects just can't comprehend, we reach a point
No.
where there isn't any more between the two in the
Right.
first place.
Right. Right.
And let's leave it on that very beautiful note. Father Emmanuel Morinelli, Trappist monk, Roman Catholic priest, very, very dear friend and brother of mine. And I thank you so much for gracing us with all of the wisdom and your charm on this topic of fasting. And I hope that everybody got a lot from it. I personally know I did. And so I thank you very much. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.